Got open man. DJ Moore. End zone. Touchdown. Touchdown Bears.
I am Jeff Joniak.
Blitz is on. Down he goes. Brisker.
What was it like playing for Coach Ditka?
I don't want to answer any questions like that.
Pressure coming. He's in big trouble. Down he goes. Montez Sweat.
And etc.
Now, Bears Etc. brought to you by Chevy Drives Chicago, the official truck partner of your Chicago Bears.
Well, we're just about a week from the start of the new league year in the NFL, and that means the start of free agency, trades being finalized, and all this in the aftermath of a just completed NFL scouting combine. We discuss in episode 211 of the Bears Etc. podcast with Super Bowl winning Bears guard Tom Thayer. I'm Jeff Joniak. This episode of Bears Etc. is brought to you by Miller Lite, the official beer partner of your Chicago Bears. Tastes like Miller time, Chicago. Go to MillerLite.com/BearsPod to find delivery options near you. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. Tom, how you feeling? A lot of news going on. We got a special guest today, too. We'll get to Sam Bruchhaus, a senior data analyst at Sumer Sports, a company growing rapidly in the college and pro scouting space, even with NFL teams. We'll get to that in a minute. But the news of the week right now, reportedly, the retirement of Drew Dalman, the Bears Pro Bowl center at the age of 27 after just 5 years in the NFL. It's all reportedly right now, but it hit the news wire, and you were the first to text me.
Well, you know, it's like the cartoon we used to watch as a little kid when they push the snowball off the top of the hill and then it just gains momentum and gets bigger and faster. That's what happens to the NFL season as soon as you start talking about free agency, as soon as the combine is over, because that momentum is rolling and it's not going to stop until Super Bowl next year. But, you know, in reference to Drew Dalman, I feel a couple different ways about it. I envy him for being able to be in a position in life where he feels confident in doing this. He's a super intelligent young man with a degree out of Stanford. He's got NFL bloodlines. He knows what it takes to be a great NFL football player, and he knows the commitment to the team. So, hey, he's got a luxury in life that he's been able to achieve a lot of financial success, and he's able to make this call. And I hope that's all it is. But now it's about the Bears. They're not getting the rug pulled out from underneath their feet 2 weeks before the start of the season. Long before the commitment to free agency and the draft, they have notification by Drew that, hey, this is what I'm thinking at this point in the offseason, and I'm giving you plenty of time to react to it, and however you see fit, it fits the Bears the best.
It's funny how we all look at timelines, though, because they started working on their off-season program with 6 weeks to go in the regular season. They're getting draft thoughts. They're trying to look at where the scouts are going to focus on with the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl and the interviews that they were going to ultimately have at these events, and then the Combine, of course. And all the while, you're talking to agents and free agency in Indianapolis just a week ago, maybe lining up everything because March 9th, it's the unofficial opening. Deals are made. They're kind of cut in Indianapolis, and so this is what exactly it happened on March 3rd, and free agency starts March 11th. So that's an 8-day warning when you get right down to it.
Yeah, so now you're a leader of a football team and you get a lot more money stuffed back in your pocket. Do you go to a more expensive restaurant, or do you still try to be sensible about the deals you're making? And that's one thing about Drew Dalman. He is a model citizen of the NFL, but now Ryan Poles and his staff, they have the opportunity to investigate how that money's going to be spent most efficiently for the Bears offensive line or whatever other position they feel the need.
Yeah, it'll give the Bears, I believe, by all counts, probably a double-digit million, low end of that, double-digit million salary cap relief for the 2026 season. So, and they need some relief. Obviously, there's going to be some moves here in the coming days. But one more thing, Andrew. So he played every snap of the season in front of Caleb Williams. We thought that was vitally important for Caleb, the young quarterback, to have the same guy as many snaps as you could get out of him without injury or performance-related dismissal from the lineup. So that was a box check. He goes to the Pro Bowl for the first time in his career. But it presumably ends at 74 games. After a 17-start season, he allowed just one sack and 3 penalties, Tom. He was very consistent for what it was the number one pass blocking graded team in the NFL last season, the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, listen, man, when they brought in these interior free agents and trades on the inside of this offensive line, you got exactly what you hoped you would get out of them. You got the durability, the efficiency, the effectiveness, the leadership, and everything that, you really don't know what you're getting sometimes when you go out and sign free agents in the NFL. But the Bears got everything out of Joe Thuney, Drew Dalman, and Jonah Jackson. But now you got to take all the experiences that you've learned along the way with Ryan and his staff and go out there and try to pinpoint that free agent or that draft choice that you feel that can come in here and fit along with the rest of this offensive lineman, Dan Rochar, and his offensive line coaching staff.
And Dan Wiederer from The Athletic wrote that in previous 11 seasons, the Bears had used 7 Week 1 starters at center, including Dalman. So there's been quite a bit of revolving door, so that'll be an 8th in 12 seasons when the season gets underway. Of course, Tyler Linderbaum, a Baltimore set to become a free agent and could very well become the highest paid center ever. So that's the high end of it all, but we'll save that for another time. We got to remind Bears fans, Steinhoffels is a proud partner of the Chicago Bears. This Bears season, Steinhoffels partners with Special Spaces Illinois to create dream bedrooms for children battling cancer. For every false start caused by the Bears defense during a home game, Steinhoffels donates $1,000 to Special Spaces Illinois. Shop in-store and online at steinhoffels.com. So I've been telling Tom for the last few years about Sumer Sports. I've referred to them. I've given them a lot of love on our pregame show. I've used it in my Joniak's journal many times for some statistical stuff. And I've really come to appreciate what they've done. And for those who are maybe not aware of it, we're going to introduce you to it here today on Bears Etc. We'd like to welcome in Sam Bruchhaus, a senior data analyst at Sumer Sports, a company growing in the pro and college scouting space with former NFL scouts, GMs, and other football analysts coming together. Sam, welcome. And did I hit a home run there with the introduction of Sumer Sports? Do I have exactly what you guys are doing?
You did. And I think that we are working at a rapid pace here to try to blend technology and old school scouting because we think there's true value. You read Moneyball and you listen to some of these other folks who are data scientists like myself, and they want to tell you that analytics and tech and AI can fix everything. That's not what we necessarily believe here at Sumer Sports. I played football myself. I played linebacker down at Tulane University, and then I'm a data scientist as well. So I bring the data element, and I love working with guys like Mike Mayock, who's a former general manager and NFL Network guy on our staff, with Mike McCagnon, John Idzik, former Jets general managers, Phil Emery, former Chicago Bears general manager. Those guys and our scouting team really bring an excellent amount of intelligence, experience to our data team, who are, well-renowned in the world of technology and artificial intelligence and computer vision and all these kind of techie things. We find that when you bring those together and you have them work together to tell stories, that the eye typically ends up meeting the AI, one of my favorite phrases. And you can tell better stories about football than just both of them separate of each other.
Tom, I bet you $1 million right now you had never in your life, 40 years in football as a broadcaster and or player, that you would ever have a data scientist talking football with you.
Well, I'm glad I do, because I did go and watch an extensive amount of the video of your guys, your crew, your preparedness, your professionalism. And I really admired how well everybody intelligently spoke. They weren't reading a script. It wasn't they had hesitation in their conversation of what they were having on a specific player. And I got to say, I've always trusted myself in watching video and kind of studying the game and looking at the different coaches I played for. But I got to say, Sam, it's probably the most well-presented talent evaluators that I've ever seen, and I look forward to watching a lot more of it. And congratulations to you and your whole crew for being so well prepared and so well put together.
Thank you so much. The evaluation on YouTube is really the crown jewel, I think, of what we've put together, because I think what a lot of the audience may not know is these draft meetings go on in like January or February. Like, people are discussing what they're going to do in the draft up until April, when the draft actually occurs. But 75 to 80% of these evaluations are being done in January and February. And it's a mix of your scouts. We have a ton of former scouts on the evaluation on YouTube. The general manager asking questions. There's a great moment in our first episode, the quarterback episode, where Mike Mayock, someone who sat in the big chair, in the general manager chair, asked one of our scouts about Cole Payton, the quarterback from North Dakota. He says, how high would you take him? And he's like, and he kind of waffles a little bit. Those are the real discussions. And he says, no. Would you take him with the number 10 pick in this draft? And finally, he says, I'd consider taking him at the number 10 pick. Then they throw to me, the data analyst, and I describe the data behind it and what the stats are saying in excess of or in support of, some of the character evaluation, the effort evaluation, the stuff that the data can't pick up. And that's those cool moments that happen in draft meetings that you can see on the evaluation, but you won't see anywhere else.
Sam, can I ask you some about data analysis? Because I feel weird because I'm not over the moon. I'm not obsessed with the quarterback from Indiana. And so when you talk about your data analysis, you talk about what Mendoza can offer you, but can you also take data of what he's playing against for the first time in his life? He's going to be playing against the best athletes he's ever played in his life. The fastest defensive linemen, the fastest edge rushers, the fastest defensive back. So when you look at a position as difficult as quarterback to get it right, do you take in consideration the other side of the ball as well as the position specifically?
What you're describing, particularly at the quarterback position, and this is not even considering Mendoza himself. What you're talking about is what us data scientists call base rates. At the base, how well does the number 1 pick in the draft at the quarterback position do as a quarterback? And Bears fans will maybe be surprised to realize that the average first pick quarterback in the draft performs about as well as Justin Fields did in a Bears jersey. So it is immensely hard already to be successful as a quarterback in this league, even if you are considered the best player in any given draft. Let's look at Mendoza for a second, though. He really only has what we call one blue chip trait. And what we like to see from the top of the top of the top, whether it's a running back or a quarterback, is what we call a blue chip trait. That means that they are performing in the 99th percentile of something that, working with the scouts, we've found a statistic that we deem important. Ironically, he's not the most mobile guy, but he is a selective scrambler. And we found that he's actually blue chip in being able to make big plays with his legs that help the team win. That showed up in the national championship game. Obviously, they put him in a design run scenario. He's able to compete and convert for a touchdown. But other than that, I have to agree with you. The data just thinks he's a quality college prospect, not necessarily a blue chip guy. And at the combine, I like to get a consensus of the data, get a consensus of the evaluators while I'm there, and check those hypotheses with data. So I liked asking all of the evaluators, all the folks from the teams that I was eating dinner with and so forth and so on, where would you draft him 24, 25, 26 in the quarterback class? And I often found that some people felt that his prospect profile was more like the Michael Penix, Bo Nix profile as compared to the Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Caleb Williams profile. So to answer your question, I really do think he is in a separate tier than those certified blue chip quarterbacks. But I will note he's going into a Raiders system with Clint Kubiak that's not going to ask him to do a ton. We've seen it resurrect Derek Carr to a certain degree in a Saints uniform. We've seen it resurrect Sam Darnold to a certain degree in a Seahawks uniform. I think it could do the same for Mendoza. But from a pure prospect profile perspective, we do not think he is a certifiable blue chip Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May type guy. We think he's a tier below that.
Introducing Cruz Blanca, a line of Mexican-American premium cervezas. Cruz Blanca, cerveza refreshed. Proud partner of the Chicago Bears. Sam, man, you're just, you could tell that your knowledge base is significant, right? The way you're just spewing out this stuff, because it is now your career, right? So the way I'm analyzing this from the outside looking in and knowing some people who work there, are you guys treating it like one big professional football team scouting department with analytics researchers and all that added in the mix, and you sit at a boardroom table? This is in my mind's eye. I don't know if this actually happens. and you guys hammer out every prospect, or at least the top end of what the draft will be, maybe the top 150 players, or maybe all of them, I don't know. And are there hearty discussions, tempers that may, get the discussion going a little bit because you're a data analyst who played football, but then there's the old-time scouts that, they are just getting recently introduced to the idea?
I think that's a good way to put it, except we do not have the demands of the schedule. So we're not trying to win games on Sunday. We're not necessarily trying to nail any single draft. What we're trying to do is provide advice and data over a long period of time and build great long-term relationships, which allows us to do a little bit different. I don't know how many people, invest in the stock market, but a lot of people take short-term bets in the stock market, and sometimes they pay off and sometimes they don't. That's kind of what the teams are forced to do by the NFL schedule. We're allowed to make those long-term bets. And so one of the key items that I think comes up where I stand my ground and I stand 10 toes down and I don't budge, and the old school scouts don't, is drafting running backs high. And this is a thing that I refuse to give up on. We used to have Thomas Dimitroff, who's now with the Saints. He was the president of the company before moving back into that role. And now we have John Idzik and Mike Mayock, who are doing similar roles. And I was on a radio show with Mayock the other day, and y'all know Mayock. I mean, he is intense as all get out. I had to raise my level of performance when he stepped on the set for the evaluation, because I was just like, this is a guy who I want to emulate and I want to match. And I've learned a lot from him. But he believes that you have to draft the best player in the draft that is available in the top 15 picks, because that's really the only place that you can get an all-pro. I believe that you cannot draft a running back because it's simply not enough surplus value, and we've seen teams do it time and time again. And though they may be an all-pro like Bijan Robinson was, often it ends up in the general manager and the head coach getting fired, and you're not winning a ton of games. And so that's my data perspective. His scouting and experience perspective is there's just not enough of these blue chip guys to go around, and we'll butt heads on that, but we think that's valuable. A lot of people want to have, everyone believing the same thing. At Sumer Sports, that's not the case. We want to present both sides of the argument so people can make their own decision, because there's a lot of value in that experience. And technology cannot necessarily quantify everything. It's my job to say what is quantifiable. And when it comes to the running back position, a guy like Kyle Monungai can be found later on in the draft and can immediately contribute to a team that goes deep into the playoffs. And that's my personal quantifiable perspective. But from that experience perspective, he has a different view. So that's one of those things that we bang heads on, and I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to bring the fire. I think it's entertaining. I think it's exciting. My job as a data scientist is to make recommendations based off the data. And so I'm going to stay strong there. Mayock's going to stay strong there. And that's what we try to bring to the audience.
You got that Louisiana Lightning in you, buddy. Lake Charles, right? I can hear it in your, right. I can hear it. Now, which brings me to Notre Dame, because didn't you get some post-grad at Notre Dame? Okay.
That is correct.
And of course,
correct.
Tom's a Golden Domer as well, and you got Jeremiah Love. We all feel, I mean, just on pure football, top 5 player in this draft, yes or no?
So here's my true belief, and I'll break down all data perspectives and my little golden eyes that I got here that I can't take the Golden Dome off of. Is he probably the best player at his position in this draft? Yes, he is. When it comes to explosive plays, he knocks our analytics, what we call over-expected. So when you're handed off the ball, what would an average player do? He does way in advance of that. And we track that on a 1/10 of a second by 1/10 of a second basis on every single play. Is he good on outside runs and inside runs? Yes, the data certifies that. Is he a guy who's going to break tackles? Yes, the data certifies that. And we do that even deeper than just saying, oh, he broke that tackle. We're looking at tackle probability on a 1/10 of a second by 1/10 of a second basis. So this is going deep in the data. He is a blue chip running back. He's probably better than Ashton Jeanty. He's one of the best we've seen in several years. Would I draft him in the first round? Absolutely not. I would not. So is in any given talent evaluation, is he probably the best player at his position in this draft? Yes, but I just simply wouldn't draft a running back until the second round. Here's why. If he goes in and he is drafted 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, he will automatically be a top 10 player in this league in terms of payment. What does that mean he has to do? He basically has to be an all-pro one of the years. And data tells us that that is not necessarily the case. Josh Jacobs in that range is about the level of player that we'll see. Josh Jacobs was on a Raiders team in which most of the crew got fired and they did not win a lot of games. And so that is the reason why I think you just can't do it, because you're going to go deeper into the running back class and you're going to find the Jadarian Prices, also a Golden Domer. He can probably contribute to a winning team. You can maybe go in free agency. You can get a Breece Hall for a year or two for $11 million, or a Travis Etienne from Jennings, Louisiana. He can jump in and be for a guy for a year or two at $8 million. But when you're getting a guy who is probably going to be worth between $9 and $11 million on average, when you could be getting a defensive end or a wide receiver who, even if they're your Robin, they're your second wide receiver or your second defensive end, they will be providing 2 to 3x value on that. It is something that I cannot stomach as a data scientist.
So, Sam, as you're an evaluator, when I was watching your crew go through their evaluation, it was all actual game tape. And I think that's when you see the reality of football. We just had the combine, 320 guys invited, only 189 guys competed. And I'm not a fan of pro days. So when you go back and you look at all the information that you digest, is it only game tape, or do you put anything into the combine and pro days?
So I put stuff more in the combine. I think the pro days are more of a horse and pony show, but they are important for the guys who do not get a shot to go to the combine. I think more data is more data. And if we can get those pro days, it is something that we should get. Let's talk about the combine for a second, though. If I were to rank it out of 10, how much the combine should contribute to a prospect profile, I would only put it at about a 3. I would not go anywhere more than that. And really, I would only put it at a 3 for offensive tackles, tight ends, and maybe linebackers. And that's really it. Offensive tackles and tight ends for sure. Here's the reason why. We do not see a big correlation between success at the next level and any given combine metric. And shocker, for wide receivers, I was shocked by this data as well, which you can find on sumersports.com under my name right now. Wide receivers who run the crazy 40s and put up the crazy numbers, they're actually the weakest correlation. They're probably about a 1 or a 2 out of 10 in terms of their prospect profile. For whatever reason, the 40-yard dash and the 3-cone and so forth and so on don't actually tell us that much about what it takes to succeed at the wide receiver position at the next level. So tackles, it does matter a little bit because there's just so few individualized data points historically about tackles. And so it's the game tape and it's maybe the 40 and the 3-cone. With the defensive end, it's a little similar. With tight ends, it's the 40 and the broad jump. Those typically have a pretty good correlation with success. So guys like Kenyon Sadi, guys like Eli Stowers, that may mean a little bit more than them than it means for a guy who put up a 4.3 at the wide receiver position. But all that to say, I take a little stock in the combine, but other than that, it's the game film. It is for us data scientists, it is the tracking data that correlates to that game film, and it's the box score statistics. That's really the 3 things that I think people should be focusing on at all times. And, you watch a game like Jeremiah Love against USC, 2 gigantic plays in the first 5 plays, followed by an excellent play where you can see it in his head. He decides to kind of dive forward, make a big play on 2nd or 3rd down. Like that type of stuff is what we want the scouts to do. We look at the tracking data and then we sprinkle in a little seasoning of combine data to just maybe move a guy a spot or 2 up if 2 guys are very similar. That's how we use that data.
When I got out of college, we had to go to 3 different combines, 3 different spots. We had to go to one in Seattle, one in Detroit, and one in Tampa. When I watch the combine now, after all these years of experience, I don't care about the 40. I don't care about most. The only thing I do is I watch movement drills and I watch their hips, because every single player that plays, no matter what position they're playing, their hips are the most important part of their success. Whether it's a defensive back watching them swivel, a wide receiver, how they break down, an offensive tackle, how they flip into their 45-degree angle blocking position. So I just think that you kind of got to break it down to the importance of what they're trying to accomplish and what can help you most identify a player that can really develop into the next level.
Exactly. And you were defining something right now that technology can't quite approximate, which is what we would call joint tracking, how the hips move in relationship to the knees and the ankles and so forth and so on. But it was announced at the nerd festival of the combine. It's called the Big Data Bowl. And man, we finally got Greg Olson in there this year. And we adopted him as our own. And now he's one of us. He's one of the nerds. And I'm happy to have another football player in there, man. There's a couple of football players that we already got. Sam Schwartzstein from Amazon Prime. So now he's in the fraternity of the Big Data Bowl crew. But the one of the vice presidents at the NFL actually announced that they've been working on joint tracking data internally. They've been cleaning it up, and they're getting ready in the next 2 or 3 years to share that joint tracking data with their suppliers and with their exclusive partners, which will ultimately be coming to guys like me at Sumer Sports. And when we have that joint tracking data, I'm extremely excited to start looking into exactly what you just said, how the hips move, what their relationship is to the other part, how they sync for cornerbacks, how they move for tackles when people are bull rushing them. That's right around the corner. And that's something that us data scientists are constantly thinking. We're already working with our scouts trying to say, okay, if we see these certain angles, is that good or bad? Shin angles is another thing we talk about. Is that good or bad? So that we can start building up that logic so that when we get that better data, we can better talk about it, tell stories about it, and make decisions on it.
Here's the only data that Tom, my buddy for a long time now, he says this all the time. If it were up to me, forget about all this other nonsense. Let's go take a trip to the weight room. And I'm going to watch how he handles the weight room. Does he know how many plates 500 pounds is? Does he know his way around the weight room, and what is his desire to get stronger? And Tom talks about that nonstop. Good news, Chicago. United Airlines is getting brand new planes with all the bells and whistles like Bluetooth connectivity, screens at every seat, and a room for everyone's roller bag. United, proud to fly the Chicago Bears, and you too. I don't want to get too crazy here, but as you're talking about all this and the world of AI and robotics, is it too far-fetched to say one day we'll see an all-robot football game? Just for fun. Just for fun. Just for fun.
It's too far to say.
I mean, really.
Too far to say.
I mean, if we're gonna build robots to clean my house and cut my grass, we might have a robot ball watching them play football. I mean, this is so crazy.
It's too far to say, and here's why. At Sumer Sports, again, we believe that the human element is immensely important because the character, the heart of the game, that's something we'll never be able to quantify. But man, a robot could never make that Caleb Williams throw back to the wall, up in the air, in the cold. People are ripping their shirts off in Soldier Field. I've ripped my shirt off a couple of times in Notre Dame Stadium in the cold. God forbid, man. You got to love those elements of the game, and you can't do that with robots. And that's why we're not trying to do it at Sumer Sports. We're trying to provide AI and data that helps humans be a little bit better. 1% better in the NFL is how you win games.
Let's talk about that play from your eyes and your analysis. What was the conversation at Sumer Sports after that?
So we can break it down to the exact probability that he's sacked, that the play is completed, how open the receiver was on that play. And that's what we call one of the unicorn plays, because he's retreating, and as he's retreating, we see the expected yards on the play start coming down. And then you do see the player open up. So we have a thing that on the 10th of a second, each eligible receiver, we try to signify, well, if he's able to if he's able to target that receiver, a good catchable ball, how likely is it that it's completed? And so you start seeing as the player, as everyone starts to kind of scoot up a little bit, that he has a high probability of it being completed. He just got to get it there. He did not have a high probability of getting it there. And so that's a moment that we like to say that breaks the model, but we like when the models are broken, because when you can perform over average or over whatever the model is predicting that will happen over and over and over and over and over again, that becomes predictive. And Caleb Williams, for example, this season, we noted very, very early on, the models called it very quickly, that he had adjusted and made changes to the way that he avoids sacks. And it was primarily due to his athleticism, which was a different case from last year where he was getting sacked all the time. He had made clearly a change in the offseason to rebuild his body. And thus his sack rate crashed. And that's just a result. But we were seeing him get out of harder sacks than he was last year, or harder pressures than he was last year as well. And so that's one of those items that I think Caleb did an excellent job at last year. And I think that really changed the way that offense worked, because when his sack rate went into the, top 5 or 10 of quarterbacks in the league instead of the bottom 5 or 10, that led to less negative plays. That allowed him to create with his legs in the scramble game, which thus forced defenders to care about him when they were covering, and thus opened up passing lanes for guys like Colson Loveland as the season went on. It made a really big difference. We caught it very early in the data, and it ended up tracking all the way down, even into that play itself.
So when you look at that anticipated escapability by a quarterback and you think about the protection called, do you take that into account, or is it merely on the human element that you're looking at?
So it's tough because we are not on the Chicago Bears coaching staff. And, I was playing basketball out there at the combine, and all of a sudden I go up for a rebound. I catch an elbow in the ribs, and it's Antoine Randall L catching me, making sure that I'm not able to, make a layup. But I'm not on that coaching staff. I'm just getting hit at the YMCA in Indianapolis, right? So it's difficult for us to know exactly what the protection is, but we can approximate it. We have models that try to guess, and it'll give us probabilities that it's a certain protection or one thing or the other. But then when it comes down to it, the way our models work is the way that we think that scouts watch film, and they brought us to this realization that it's all about relationships. How is the left tackle related to the left guard to the center to the right guard to the tackle? Those 5 guys related to the quarterback, and so forth and so on. We try to make valuations of those relationships, and that's what helps us build these predictions of the protection. So while we don't necessarily know exactly what was called and what the rules were, we can approximate based off comparing to every other subset going back to 2016 what we thought was going on, and using that we typically get a pretty good idea of, should he be sacked on this play? How fast should he get the ball out realistically? How far should he get the ball down the field at any given point in time? And so that's kind of how that operates.
Well, there appears to be a potential disruption in that 5-man unit that did such a great job last year up front, with the reported news that Drew Dalman is elected to retire at age 27, 5 years deep in the league. Tommy and I discussed some of that at the top of our show here. Word travels, like Tommy said, like a snowball around the league. What was the reaction at Sumer Sports?
So I think when you look at that, that's a tough decision for a guy to make. He obviously signed a large contract last year as well. Many thought it was an overpay. It ended up being one of the better free agency signings of the season. And I think from a perspective of what it means for the Bears, it'll be very interesting to see how they approach free agency. In the analyst community, we have a couple proverbs that we like to say, and it's that you draft tackles, you sign interior offensive linemen. We've seen teams like the Bears do it last year with Tooney, Jackson, and Dalman. 3 new guys they bring in. They end up being pretty locked on the interior offensive line. We've seen it with the Carolina Panthers, who kind of changed their rushing fortunes over the past 2 years by bringing in Lewis and various other interior offensive linemen. That's typically the way that teams want to build. You can go get quality interior offensive linemen in free agency for a pretty penny, but not a crazy amount, but you can't find tackles. You got to draft the tackles. And so when it comes down to it, I am interested in how they're going to evaluate this. Obviously, Tyler Linderbaum right now is a free agent. I do wonder, given that typically when a player retires, that salary cap ends up kind of freeing up. If that money doesn't just go to a player like Tyler Linderbaum or one of these free agents, I'd be surprised if they try to address it early on in the draft. Maybe they try to bring in replacements later on in the draft, but that's typically what us analysts see work out from a team building perspective, is you attack the interior offensive line via free agency. And I think that may be a change from what, a couple of weeks ago, the Bears thought they were going to do to now. I think you may have to move some of that money that you plan to spend in free agency into the interior offensive line and go and get a guy who can be a true starter at cost. And then obviously in the draft, it probably stays similar, given that I don't think they were probably planning to draft an interior offensive lineman, a center anyway.
You know, one thing, Sam, you got to draft a center to be a center. Don't draft a guard to be a center, especially at the NFL, because it's not a transitional position. And there's a little bit more difficulty to it than just saying, oh, I can take this template of an athlete and turn him into a center.
Definitely. And I think you look at the centers that Ben Johnson has had, and that is exemplified. While he was a Lions, he had Frank Ragnow, who is the guy. I mean, a multi-time Pro Bowl center. Then we move over to the Chicago Bears. He brings in Drew Dalman, who was part of a interesting scheme under Zach Robinson with the Falcons, and had proven himself to be a quality run blocker at the center position. So I agree with you there, and I think that's why they're probably going to target a quality center in free agency rather than, a younger center, and definitely not a guard to fill in that center position.
When Mexican heritage meets American brewing, game day gets an upgrade. Celebrate responsibly, Chicago. Cruz Blanca, one of our sponsors of Bears, etc. When you watch Ben Johnson's game plans unfold each week, whether it be in Detroit or now here with the Bears, how intriguing is it from a data analyst perspective, and how much fun is it to watch? Because we certainly got a big charge out of it this year. We never knew what to expect. And that was dramatic for fans and dramatic for us as announcers, especially come fourth quarter. You just never knew what was coming next.
It's immensely intriguing, and here's why. There's a couple ways that we like to evaluate offensive play callers or head coaches. And the three real things are, number one, it's almost like a stool. Number one, how diverse is whatever the plays they're calling are? Number two is, are they getting the most out of their players, which is a little harder to quantify, but you can use stuff like where they were drafted, how much money they spent, so forth and so on, to get a view of if they're overperforming. And then number three, how are they managing the game? And I think number one, as you said, how fun is it to watch Ben Johnson, an offensive play caller? It is insane. If you go look at sumersports.com/SumerLive, we still have it up. We were charting these games live using our artificial intelligence. It was coming in before the TV was even showing the plays. And you'll find the different run concepts. I think we have a buckets of 6 or 7 that we highlight. Ben Johnson uses all of them. He uses the full deck of cards, the types of routes that these guys are running. Full deck of cards. And I think that's why you see a guy like Colson Loveland at the tight end position, which typically we see guys like Travis Kelce made his first all-pro team or first Pro Bowl, 3 or 4 years down the line. It was similar for great tight ends like Tony Gonzalez, some of these other guys. That's why you see Colson Loveland challenge for an all-pro team year one in his career, because he is put in a position where, number one, he's blocking in a lot of different schemes, and that opens up the passing game, particularly when utilizing play action, for him to be a 3-level threat. And I think that second portion of, are you getting more out of the players? He almost turned him into an all-pro. Obviously, they drafted him in the first round, but he got more out of the tackles as well than we have seen in previous years as well. He took Caleb from a high sack guy to a low sack guy. These are all signifiers of good coaching in my purview. And then finally, you look at the game management stuff. Guys, y'all may disagree with me. Also, I come from a school that went for it on fourth down already, so I'm biased to begin with. Old coach Willie Fritz, who had an excellent year at Houston. We're going to talk a lot about those Houston guys. AJ Halsey was there for a period of time, safety in this year's draft. But the aggressiveness mixed with the play calling, mixed with the idea that he's going to get the most out of his guys, is just a brilliant thing for me to watch as a data scientist.
One thing about it, I think that it gives a lot more for the defensive coordinator to think about when he thinks there's going to be more frequency of going for it on fourth down. It's not like you're thinking about a 3-and-out plan. You got to think about a 3-and-out and maybe a fourth. And so I do think that throws a little bit of complexity into the thinking of a position coach, a coordinator.
For sure. And I think the reason why scheme diversity and aggressiveness on fourth down is so important is because exactly that. It makes defensive coordinators have to do new plans and have to test untested waters. And it just makes them generally uncomfortable. And so I look at a team like the Texans this year, who had better talent than everyone on defense. Bar none. They had Will Anderson, Kamari Lassiter, who we talked about at the Super Bowl, Stingley, Al Shire, Daniil Hunter, Jalen Petrie. I mean, you can name the names. It's like a Pro Bowl team all in itself. But they did not have a ton of scheme diversity. In fact, they had virtually zero. Did not blitz a lot, ran mostly the same coverages. How much longer can that go on for until offenses figure it out? I think maybe a year maximum. But with Ben Johnson, when he is testing guys on fourth down, when he's running new plays that you haven't seen and using a lot of new concepts, it makes it that much harder for defensive coordinators. And you only get about 2 days to really prepare in today's NFL. When you only have 2 days to prepare for Ben Johnson, that's what takes a team from a 6-win team to a team that is really challenging in the playoffs. That's the major difference there.
Score big at your local Chevy dealer. The Chevy Silverado will take you through this season in style. Chevy Drive Chicago, official truck partner of the Chicago Bears. I've always felt that to be a title contender, let alone a playoff contender and a division title contender, you got to have a bad man at safety. And that could be, a guy that's a big hitter, or he's going to put the fear of God in receivers going over the middle, or they're a takeaway guy, or they're the leader of the defense that gets the ball rolling emotionally. You name it, you know who they are, the All-Pros, some of these Hall of Famers that we've seen in our time doing games over the last 25, 29 years. But they don't necessarily, to your point about running backs, get moved up in the draft all the time unless they are deemed a special player. That's, again, a matter of opinion. How about this class? Because the Bears right now have 4 free agent safeties. And they're going to need to do something, whether it be in free agency or the draft. And I just love safeties. I fall in love with safeties. I said it. I love Thieneman from Oregon already, but I know there's others. It's just a fun project to analyze, because if you also have a defensive coordinator that's not going to put a guy in the post all the time, and they're going to do big nickel, and they're going to have him in the box, they're going to blitz him, they do all this other stuff that a creative defensive coordinator wants to do, they are weaponized.
100%. And as you mentioned, I am a swamp rat. I grew up a New Orleans Saints fan, so I had years and years of DA coaching defenses. And what he really wants to do is trot out nickel and dime personnel and face that up against anyone. You remember the great years of those Saints defenses. It was basically DeMario Davis and a host of safeties, Malcolm Jenkins, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Marcus Williams, Von Bell, so forth and so on. So that's really what he wants to do, is he wants to play light personnel, and he wants to win with big edges and up the middle with the tackles and linebackers. So all that to say, as a data scientist, I think safety is a very hard one for me, because in recent years we have seen them play multiple different positions, whether it's slot cornerback, linebacker. Some guys like Talanoa Hufanga from the Denver Broncos come off the edge, deep safety, so forth and so on. So you've seen these guys like Kyle Hamilton, Nickem and Worry, and even the deeper safeties perform really well. Malachi Starks was an impact player for the Ravens defense this year. So I think the line to take a safety is right about where the Bears are picking. Here's where I would caution, though. Typically, you can find pretty good safeties in the middle rounds. And this year, I was at the Combine, and the amount of people who said Caleb Downs is certified the best player in this draft was innumerable. I think he's probably second on the big board in terms of how well is a player going to play at his position. But you mentioned Dylan Thieneman. That's a guy who probably can perform. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. If there's a guy built in the mold of the Emmett Worries and the Hamiltons and the Derwin James, it's probably him. I mentioned A.J. Halsey from LSU. There's another guy who I think is going to be an impact performer. So you can find these safeties, and moreover, you can find them in free agency as well. So I would caution the Bears against drafting a safety in the first round, particularly if you find an edge rusher falling to you. I think there's going to be a good little cluster of edge rushers, Cassius Howell, some of these other guys that are going to be right around where the Bears are picking. I think that may be more of an intriguing need. But defensive tackles, there's going to be guys like Caleb Banks. There's going to be guys like McDonald from Ohio State, who kind of fits the mold of what we've seen DA succeed with, the Sheldon Rankins on Yamada type mold of a guy who can run stuff and then learn how to pass rush afterward. I think that may be a little bit more intriguing than the safety position. And you can attack that kind of in the middle of the draft with those guys like Halsey, et cetera, later on as compared to the first round.
All right, last question for me. Again, we appreciate your time. Is if I'm not mistaken, you guys also, and you don't need to, obviously you're not going to say, but you also do a lot of work for NFL teams. Is this true?
Yeah.
And ultimately, what do you want to be as a company?
Yeah, our goal is to provide great insights to anyone that wants them. And so right now you can find a lot of them for free on sumersports.com. Our goal is to, provide at cost insights to NFL teams and NCAA teams as well. And so we really want to work with anyone who loves football. And so that's what Sumer Sports is about. We provide scouting insights. We provide, detailed data charting on a live basis as the game is going on. We found it to be immensely helpful to our team of NFL professionals, including myself and all the way up to our ex-general managers. And we think it could be helpful for everyone else as well.
Great stuff. Keep up the good work. Good luck to that company and everything moving forward. Sounds like you're just scratching the surface, too, and really football fans can't get enough all year round, so this is right up everybody's alley. Tom, any final thoughts before we let him go?
So you got a chance. You got 11, 12, 13 personnel. You got a safety or that tight end that give you H-back, fullback, tight end, backside tight end. What are you looking at?
I'm a big believer in 12 personnel. I think that ironically at this point, given that you can trot out guys like Eli Stowers, who's going to go in this draft, or Colson Loveland, who can virtually be a tight end, I think you got to go 12 personnel. But on the flip side of that, I think you got to try to match it with nickel or dime. I think that is what we saw Mike McDonald, Jesse Minter, some of the best defensive coordinators, young up-and-coming coordinators. So I think if you want to sit down, be happy with your victory, and drink a Cruz Blanca cerveza, you got to go nickel. Man, you got me with that ad read, man. I got to go find one of those out here in Atlanta where we're at on our on-site, man. So you got to go with nickel or dime. I think that's the new paradigm if you want yourself a Cruz Blanca.
All right. Man, the guy knows what he's doing. He knows how to work it. How do you tell a cashier you're a Bears fan without telling him you're a Bears fan? With the Chicago Bears PNC Bank Visa debit card, which gets you exclusive discounts on Bears merchandise. Find out more at pnc.com/BearsCard. Unbelievable time here with Sam Bruchhaus of Sumer Sports. For Sam and for Tom Thayer, I'm Jeff Joniak. Thanks for listening, everybody. Please subscribe now to the Chicago Bears official app, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And bear down.